This story is it's about a village. It took place in a village a while ago. And there was this particular tree. It was a plum tree. And everybody who ate the plums on that tree all agreed that they were remarkably delicious. It wasn't the green kind of plums. It wasn't those round plums. I know them as Italian plums. They're purple and they're shaped sort of like an egg. And they're just a little bit sour and a little bit sweet. And that's exactly what this tree was like. Now, there was that tree lived on the property of this old woman. And she was somewhat beloved in that little village. And so it came to be nearly Thanksgiving time, and the village was going to have a little gathering just to celebrate their community and the year and the harvest and all those kinds of things, right? And so the woman gathered all those plums off the tree with her two sons. She was an older woman. Her sons were maybe about my age, right? So they gathered all those plums and they took them to the baker. Now, there was a baker in town and he was really well respected. People loved him. His breads were wonderful. Everything that he made was incredible. And so the woman with her sons brought the plums in a big container over to the baker. And she said, "Hey, baker, we're going to have a little gathering in a couple days for our village to say thanks, share the year. And I would like you to make a pie out of these plums. They are the best plums. Everybody agrees. And we know that you are an incredible baker." And when the baker saw the plums, he knew too. He was talented and he knew his talent. He wasn't shy about it. And he picked up one of the plums and held it, and he could feel that they were just perfectly ripe. And so he said, "Sure, okay, I will make you a pie so that you can share it." And so he took the plums from the old woman and her sons, said goodbye, "I'll see you tomorrow." And they walked away. Well, it was mid-afternoon or so at this point. So he fired up his oven, rekindled the fire that was in there. And he got out some flour and a little bit of butter and some salt and some water. And he mixed together the dough for this pie. Now, it was a lot of plums. And so he was going to have to make a huge pie. And he did. He had a huge dish. And he spread the dough out. And then he went to the plums. And he pitted all those plums. He cut them up. And he added in just the right spices, some walnuts and things to make that plum pie even more delicious. And mixed it up, put it in, put the dough over the top, and put it into his oven. And it was baking. And in the meantime, the baker went about his day, cleaned up his shop. A couple people came in, bought loaves of bread, that kind of thing, whatever bakers do, right? And finally, in late afternoon, around evening time, the whole bakery filled with the smell of that pie. And the plums were exquisite. And that fire had kindled that aroma, and it just filled the entire room. And the baker, has a huge pie. So he's got the hot pads. He reaches in that oven and pulls that pie out. It's like so heavy, and sets it down on the counter to cool. And he smells it. He smells it. And he says to himself, right? Thinks to himself, boy, that pie smells so good. I mean, I make good pies. I make good pie, I make good stuff, but that pie smells so good. If I could just have one piece, just one piece, you know? But, of course, he wasn't going to do that. He wasn't going to cut a piece out of that pie. And he looked at it a little bit and closed up the rest of his shop, locked the door, and went in the back and up the stairs, because that's where he lived, in the back. And evening came and it got dark and the baker went to sleep. Now, there happened to be an elf that lived in that little village. And the truth is that elf came in to the bakery pretty often. And he snuck through a little crack in the door. He's just a little guy. And as soon as he got in there, whoa, that smell of that pie just hit him. And he loved that baker. He loved the breads, he loved the muffins and whatnot. And he would always, what he did is he would come in at night and he would just eat the crumbs off the floor. He would never eat any of the finished goods because he was a really respectful little elf. But there were always little crumbs and bits on the floor, and he was just a little guy. So those crumbs, this is a lot of food for him. It's great. And so he came in, but he smelled that pie and he knew immediately that it was special. The baker made all kinds of good things, but this was special. It was exceptionally good. And he smells it. And he's so taken with that smell that he starts walking around the shop looking for what it is. And he's leading himself this way and that, walking through the shop. And he looks where, loaves of bread are sometimes stored, some of the muffins. That's not it. That's not it. Finally, he climbs up to the counter and he finds that huge dish. I'm talking this pie's, this big around. Whew. He smells that pie. He smells that pie and it just smells so good. So good. And so he has this thought, just like the baker. He thinks to himself, if I could just have one piece, just one piece. And, he does. He actually thinks to himself, I'm so small. I'm so small that, if I just had like a tiny little nibble, nobody would even notice, nobody would even notice. And he wouldn't normally do it, but he couldn't stop himself. It was that good. And so he took just this tiny crumb off the top of that crust. But when he pulled that little crumb off, at the bottom, it had a little bit of the plum filling that was kind of stuck to it, that had cooked into the bottom, and the top was golden brown. And he ate a bite of it and just filled his heart. I mean, he was happy. He was happy. It was delicious. His nose was happy. His mouth was happy. He did a little, because he enjoyed it so much. You ever do that when you're hungry? I do that. I do. He finished that little crumb. And you know what he said to himself? He said, well, I mean, it's just a tiny little crumb. I'm just a little guy. And it's just a little crumb. I'll just have one more bite, just one more bite. And so he takes off just a little piece of that crust, so flaky, buttery, perfect amount of salt. That bakery's good. And just that like plum filling stuck on the bottom, and he eats it. And he's just loving it. He finishes that and he goes, oh my God. Oh my God. That was the best pie I've ever had in my life. And so what he does. You already know. He takes another little piece, right? And it's just a tiny little piece. And he's eating it and he's eating it. Well, he takes a few pieces, And after a while, he's finally sitting down, sits on the counter, leans against the pie tin, the little whatever it is, and his belly is so full, so round, and he's just sitting there super happy as could be, thinking, wow, this was a great day to come to the baker's. He's so happy. And he's sitting there. And finally he thinks, well, I should be moving on. Should head home. He didn't want to, he had to be out of there before morning comes. And he stands up and he turns around, and he looks at the pie. Well, guess what? He had eaten so many little tiny bites that there was it's like there was a hole. There's a hole in the pie now, right? It's not a big hole. It's a little hole. I mean, it's probably not even an inch wide, but it's a hole, and it's visible. He can see it. Of course, everybody's going to notice it. What happened? Why is there a hole there? And so now he feels guilty. He was loving the pie and he still did, but he feels bad because he recognizes, it's not his pie. And actually he had no right to just walk in and eat it. So now he feels bad. And he sits there and he wonders, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? But then he has an idea. He knows he's in the baker's shop. And he actually is, he knows what he's doing. He's a productive little elf. So he runs down off the counter and he gets a little bowl and he runs to where the baker has the flour. He gets a little bit of flour in there and there's a little bit of salt. And he just sprinkles just a little bit of salt and he finds the butter and he just takes just a little sliver off there, puts that in there, and then just like a little sprinkle of water. And he starts mixing it. And he's thinking, I'm going to make it like a cap, just a little piece of dough and we'll get it to fit in there. It'll cover it. Nobody will notice. It'll be good, right? Okay, why not? So he's mixing it up, doodly-doo, and he runs over to the oven. Now, this is a long time ago. So like that oven, like I said, it's wood fired and it had cooled down. And it was, he could still feel the warmth from the day, but, wasn't hot enough to bake. So he walks in there and, he uses a stick and he kind of pokes around a little bit and he looks for a coal and he finds that little glowing coal in there. And he takes his stick and he finds a couple other little bits of wood and he puts them on there and he blows. And he blows on that coal. You ever do that? You blow on the coal and it kind of goes, right? Makes this noise. And then just a few little flames, lit up on that, just a little bit of a fire in the stove. But it's just enough. He's just making this little cap. It'll work, right? So he goes back and he gets his dish and he takes his dough and he pats it real flat and he puts it right there over the fire. He closes the oven door and he climbs out and he finds a spot and he leans against the counter. And now it takes a while. It takes a while to bake, maybe an hour or so. It's hard to tell how much time passed, but he was content. He was happy. He had this incredible pie and he felt like he was making amends for what he had done. So he felt good. He was proud of himself and he still smells the pie. And now he can even smell just barely, just a little bit, but he smells that little pie cap that's baking in the oven. So he's sitting there. He goes back and he checks it now and again. And finally, it's been a long night at this point, but he goes back to the oven and he realizes that it's done. So, he gets tiny little hot pads, one way or another, little scraps of something on the ground. He pulls it out, and he takes the ashes from the fire and he kind of kicks them apart, so it doesn't look like anything had happened. There's no fire there, it's just the little coals left mixed in the ashes like they normally would be. And he takes the cap out and he brings it over to the counter where the pie is and he lets it cool a little bit so he can hold it. And he's looking at it. And as he's looking at the cap and he's looking at the pie, it's not an exact fit. It's close, but it's not exactly the right size. So, he's realizing, okay, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to, just break off the edges a little bit. I gotta, it's a unique fit. He wants to get it in there, fit right. So he finally, it cools enough that he can pick it up and hold it in his hand. So he does, and he starts just breaking off the edges a little bit, breaking off the edges a little bit, and just molding it to the shape of the little hole that he had created. And he gets there, and he's nearly complete. He's almost done, and he's feeling like, all right, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. And as he's doing it, he hears this sound. Boom, boom, boom. And whoa, what was that? I don't know what that was. And he's looking around. He's not sure, but then he hears it again. Boom, boom, boom. And he's, now he's scared. And as he's looking around, he looks out the window and he realizes that there's actually a little bit of dawn light coming through the window. And he's thinking, whoa, it's almost morning. And what does that sound? Boom, boom, boom. And he looks over towards the stairway, and you know what he sees? He sees the legs of the baker coming down the stairs. That's what he hears. He hears the baker, boom, 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 coming down the stairs. Baker's a big guy. He eats a lot of food. He lives in a bakery, right? And he's just a little elf. So the elf is terrified. He's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And he's looking, boom, boom, boom. Baker is standing in the middle of the floor, right? The elf is looking right at him in the eye. Now the baker doesn't see him, because the baker doesn't know that there's an elf there. But the elf and he's terrified. He doesn't know what to do. The baker has never seen the elf. You got to understand that, right? The elf comes in at night, eats the crumbs, and then is out the door. The baker has no idea that there's an elf that does this. So the elf is standing there. He's holding his little cap. He doesn't know what to do. And the baker starts walking into the room. And the elf looks at the pie and looks at his cap. And he's just not sure. And he makes a split-second decision, and he holds a little cap, and he just jumps right into that pie. He just jumps into it, and he takes a little cap, and he's like above it, and he kind of, fits it in place, and he's holding on there. There's just a little bit of room to breathe in there, and now he's just like, he's all gushy in the plums now, but it's all right, and he's like, that's where he is. Well, the baker comes in. And the baker does this every morning. He comes in because baker gets up super early, because people come buy their bread and their things, first thing in the morning. He's got to have that bread baked fresh. So he goes, he gets his mixing bowls. He starts getting his flour, his salt, his yeast. He's making bread, a little bit of water. He starts kneading that dough, kneading that dough, kneading that dough. And as he hears knock at the door. Well, it's early. He doesn't have anything to sell yet. He hasn't yet baked his bread, but he hears that knock again. Right? All right, whatever. He wipes his hands off on his apron and walks to the door. And he unlocks it and opens it. Who's there? The old woman, right? She says, hey, I know I'm early, but we were so excited about the pie, and we knew that you were going to make such a great pie. And so we wanted to see if you had finished it and if we could take it home. And the baker said, well, honestly, it is very early. But I have finished it. I made it yesterday afternoon. The pie's done. But you're not going to be able to carry it home. And the woman says, why? And he says, that pie is so big, I can barely hold it with my two hands. And the woman says, aha, well, that's why I brought my sons. And the sons come in. And they walk over to that pie, and, one son puts it on one side of the shoulder, the other one's got it on this side, and they walk towards the door. The woman gives the money to the baker and says, thank you. She smells it. It still just fills the room. And her sons smell it, and the baker smells it. And she says, I can tell you did an exceptional job with this pie. So thank you. It's going to be really meaningful to everybody in our little community. And the baker looks at the pie, a little bit sad to see it go, because he would have had a piece. But he says, yeah, you're welcome, and I'll see you around. And so he goes back, he's starting to mix his dough. Boom, there goes the old woman and her two sons out the door. It's hard to get that pie through the door. They had to kind of go sideways, right? So they get out, boom, now they're going and they're walking through the village. Now that pie is so good. It smells so good. As they're walking through the village, everybody who's up, they're going to get water at the well. They're walking with their donkey for some reason. I don't know what they're doing, but every person that gets there, they're smelling that pie. And I mean, and they're just like, it's like leading them with their noses, like, that kind of thing. And they just can't help it. And the old woman notices, and she's a really wonderful and lovely and friendly person. And she's made this huge pie. And so, they're walking and finally, I mean, there's like 50 people following behind them. And she says, hey, you are all welcome. We're having a Thanksgiving celebration today, and you're all welcome to come and share in this pie. So, just join us. And so they, they're like, all right. And so they're following along, and finally they get to her home. And now, sun's really come up. It's getting to be full day. And all the villagers, people who had followed them, the rest of the people in that little neighborhood, they're all starting to gather. And there's tables spread out and lots of different food. And here come the brothers, with that pie, and they set it, on the table, boom. And, so they are, as they're setting up, right? See, sometimes you forget in the middle of a story, it's like, what, where did it go? But then you just got to like hang out and it comes back. So they set it down on the table, right? And, everybody's looking forward to the feast that they're going to have, but they smell that pie and they know that pie is going to be the best part, right? So finally, everybody's gathered and the old woman stands in front of the crowd and she says, hey, thanks everybody for coming. I really want to give thanks today. We have such beautiful lives. We have such wonderful food to share. I'm grateful for this beautiful plum tree that provides such lovely plums for us almost every summer. The sun, that nurtured this tree, the rain that fell throughout the year on our fields and allowed us to grow our vegetables and feed our families. And I'm grateful to every one of you who has gathered here because, we help each other, we support each other throughout the year. And that's why I wanted to make this pie and to share it with you as just a sign of our love for one another. Yeah, so everybody's like, well, that's nice. That's a nice thing to say. And so people are, they're cheerful, they're happy, and they're thinking about finally getting a piece of that pie, right? So woman walks up. There's the pie on the table. Shing, and what does she do? She gets out the big knife because she's got to cut it, right? Now don't forget, there's a little elf in that pie, right? And he realizes what's going on. He heard the woman's words. He knows that they're about to cut and eat that pie. And he's still holding on to his little cap. He's been sloshed around a little bit because of the journey. And he's not really sure what to do. Well, the woman walks up. She's got the knife. And she's about to cut in that pie. And just as she's about to cut into that pie, all of a sudden, they hear, la, 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 I am alive. La, 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 I am alive. La, 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 I am alive. I'm alive. And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? Is it not the holy blessed one. And everybody in the crowd looks around. What was that? Where'd that come from? And the brothers are looking around, the woman's looking around, who just sang? But nobody, nobody knows. It's not obvious, like nobody has any idea. And so the woman kind of goes, okay, I don't know. And so she raises the knife again, and she's going to cut the pie. And as she brings the knife down, once again, la 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 la, I am alive. La 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 la, I am alive. La 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 la, I am alive. I'm alive. And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? Is it not the holy blessed one? And they look left and they look right, and everybody's looking around like, who just sang that song? What's going on? But now this time, you know what happens? One of the sons, he's looking down, and now he just happens to notice. He's looking at the pie, right? And there's this little spot. There's this little spot. It's just different. It's just pie crust, but it's a little bit different color. And it just seems odd. It just seems odd. And so at that moment, he reaches down with his fingers and he puts his fingers around that little cap on the pie and he pulls it up. And there's the elf dangling on the bottom of that little cap, those little sticky plum feet hanging out. And the brother looks at that little elf. He's never seen an elf before. And the elf is looking at the brother nervous. And he sets him down on the table. And the elf says, hey, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. Last night I was in the baker's shop. I go there all the time. And the pie smelled so good. It smelled so good and I couldn't help. And I ate some of your pie. And honestly, I feel terrible. I tried to fix it, but I didn't fix it well enough. And I'm sorry if I did anything wrong. And the old woman looked at the elf, and now he's all sticky and messy. And she says, hey, it's okay. It's okay. We forgive you. You just ate a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. And the elf, is feeling like, oh gosh, all right. And the old woman says, and maybe you could teach us that song, and then we'll both have something to share. And so the elf says, okay, that he'll do that. And she says, hey, if you want to go to our neighbors over there, there's a little water pump with a bucket, and you can wash yourself off a little bit. And he says, thank you. And he walks and he goes to clean himself. And in the meantime, the woman takes that knife, and now for real, she cuts that pie. And it's a huge pie. So it cuts into really almost 100 pieces, maybe more. And they divvy it up, and now it's going into dishes, and they're clanking and clanking. There's people, eating that pie, and they're all going, oh my God, it's so good, so good. And everybody now is just, they're just feeling that spirit of Thanksgiving, of connecting, of the community, of the pie, and the sun and the rain and everything. And the elf comes back. And when the elf comes back, they go, boom, they give him this giant piece of pie. And the elf, the pie, that piece of pie is bigger than the elf, and the elf looks at it and goes, well, thank you so much, but I can't possibly eat a piece of pie that big. And the old woman says, no, we know that. And you're welcome to have as much pie as you want, but we want you to do us a favor. We want you to take this piece of pie back to the baker because we want him to have a piece too. And the elf thought to himself, well, that's nice. That's a nice idea, but I can't possibly carry this piece of pie back there. Now, there was a man in the crowd, and he was really crafty. He would make stuff all the time. And for his kids when they were younger, right? But his kids had grown up, and he said, hey, you know what I got? I got this old little toy wheelbarrow. I made it out of a boot and, kind of put a couple sticks on the side, and I put a little wheel on the front. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go get that. We'll put the dish right in the little, opening of the shoe for boop, and then you can just drive it back to the baker. And so the elf said, all right. So he went and ran. He got the old little shoe wheelbarrow, boop, put the little thing in there, and the elf held on and started pushing it back to the baker's. And as he did, he sang to himself, la 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 la, I am alive. La 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 la, I am alive. La 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 la, I am alive. I'm alive. And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? Is it not the holy blessed one? And that was the jam. That was the elf's jam. He sang that song all the time. It was cool. When he was walking, carrying that pie, singing that song. And that's my story for you. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope you tell good stories in your life. I hope you have a good feeling in your heart, food in your bellies. All right. Take care.